I guess now known as Marin Water. I've been there for 14 years, and I work out of the Sky Oaks Ranger Station for you locals. That's in Fairfax, right up the hill from the San Anselmo Library. And though we are a water district, and our mission is to provide clean drinking water to the 190,000 people that live in northern and central Marin, another part of our mission statement is to sustainably manage our natural resources. So in addition to the water, we also have to take care of the land, the plants, the animals, and the people that all rely on the mountain. So Mount Tamalpais, about half of Mount Tam is water district land. So about 20,000 acres. We are responsible for the stewardship of that land, and that land then goes into 5 of the reservoirs that produce our drinking water. So as a government agency, we're responsible for it, but as a public land, it belongs to all of us. So as we're stewards, we also have a volunteer program to invite the public to help us be stewards as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Awesome. And then, hi everyone, I'm Natalie Francesca, otherwise known as Nat, if any of you guys have been to one of our recent volunteer events. I was born and raised in the Bay Area, or I was raised in the Bay Area, I wasn't born here, sorry. And I grew up visiting the forests of Big Basin, like the La Honda area, Woodside, and that fostered my love for nature. And then a drought throughout my childhood kind of fundamentally shaped my perspectives on the importance of sustainability and climate change mitigation in both policy and also in the quality of people's lives. That led me to attend Colby College in Maine, which I graduated from this past year in 2022. And now I work as a Grizzly Corps fellow for a Marin Water volunteer program. So just quickly and necessarily, before we get started, I wanted to give a land acknowledgement. So founded in 1912, Marin Water is the oldest municipal water district in California. Though we have managed and stewarded this land for a little over a century, the watershed we began to serve had already been carefully cultivated for thousands of years by the indigenous communities of the land now called Marin County. Today, we stand on the traditional homelands of the Coast Miwok tribe and express our respect for elders past, present, and future. We acknowledge the stewardship and longstanding connections these communities have and continue to foster with Mount Tamalpais, and seek to remain in conversation with the FIGR as we develop our regional forest health strategy. So with that, we just wanted to kind of engage some of our audience members today by popping over to some Mount Tam trivia. So I'll turn it over to Suzanne for that.
Okay, so we're not all just talking at you. We're going to do start out with a little fun trivia. Okay, so I know you're at home, so you'll just have to yell out the answers to, you know, your friend at home or a cat or whoever might be listening to you. So here we go. We're starting with a book trivia question. Which popular middle reader fiction series features Mount Tamalpais? Oh, we have someone from the live audience. Yes.
My boyfriend's gonna kill me. It's not Percy Jackson. It's like the Titans, though. Wait, oh, it is Percy Jackson. I thought it was the sequel to Percy. Oh, but it's not Tam's where the gods live.
Oh, she's good.
Yeah,
oh, she's good.
Yeah.
So we got an answer from here. So Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and that's a series for middle readers by Rick Riordan. And yes, the gods of Mount Tam. All right, second question. How many rare species rare plant species can be found on Mount Tam? Cue the Jeopardy music. Okay. All right, everybody's yelled it out at home. So we have over 40 rare plant species on the mountain. 6 of them are endemic species, and endemic species are not just native species to California. It means that they're found on Marin Mount Tamalpais lands. And that's the only place you can find them in the entire world. So 6 of them. So, you know, Mount Tamalpais is a mountain, and it's a biodiversity hotspot because we have so many different habitat types. And with that, we have a huge biodiversity of plants and animals. And because of the elevation and, you know, the pockets of different weather and everything, we're really blessed with having over 40 rare plant species just on Mount Tam. Okay. Where does the legend of the sleeping maiden originate? So if you are tuning in our locals, or you know the profile of the mountain from different views, there's a legend of a sleeping lady. Okay, so this is actually a 19th century myth, and spread into some a false piece of pop culture. So supposedly the legend is that the mountain's contour reflects the reclining profile of a young Miwok girl who was saved from a rival tribe by the shuddering of the mountain. However, this legend doesn't come from Native American folklore. It actually comes from a piece of Victorian era apocrypha. And the sleeping lady story was the creation of a playwright from the Bay Area named Dan Tothero, who wrote the first play, which was performed at the Mount Tamalpais theater. So he pretended it was from a Miwok story, and then it was picked up as such, and now it's, you know, local legend. Okay, I think we have one or two, maybe just one more. Okay. How many native species does Mount Tam host? Okay. So more than 1,200 native species. Of course, that doesn't include all the insects. There's no way. We have not cataloged all the insects, but we do have quite a lot of wildlife biologists and vegetation ecologists and fisheries ecologists that work not just for the Marin Waterlands, but state park, national park, and Marin County parks. And then there's a host of nonprofits and contractors that we work with all over the mountain who you know, survey the land for different sensitive species and weed species. And so we have a lot of great records. And we also have a Marin wildlife camera project, which is studying the mammals of the area. We have a Mount Tam bee project. So we are trying to get the bee species cataloged down to individual species. We had a lichen survey done a few years ago, and we found over 300 different types of lichen. So it just goes to show that if you don't know what you want to be when you grow up, I suggest you go into science, because there's so much that's still to be known out there. You know, we don't know it all. There's just so many more discoveries to be made. So that's my plug for science. Okay, I will put it back to Nat. Thank you.
Alrighty. So I guess to start off, we're going to be giving this presentation about forest health. And it might be useful to kind of define some of the parameters of what we're going to be talking about before we get into this, just since that can be such a huge, overwhelming kind of like concept to begin to explore. So we first wanted to talk about the very adaptable field of ecology. Like what does that really mean? So let's talk about it. This slide just has a couple, or, you know, a fair few actually, but, you know, not in the entirety, the list of different fields that might go into managing some kind of a forest landscape. So we've got everyone from a mammologist to a chiropterologist to an economist, you know, just to make sure that finances are going well, a hydrologist to check on the water. We have a taxonomist to check out what bee species that actually is, archaeologists to scope the site, statisticians and mycologists for the mushrooms, and, you know, so many different things. Yes.
What is an ichthyologist?
Ichthyologist is a fisheries scientist. Yes. I used to know why that was, but now I'm forgetting. I'm sorry. It's a cool kind of Latin way of getting there. But yeah, so but if you thought about this as each of these was an individual and you had to hire each of those individuals for the role plus so many more that I didn't have space to put up here, then suddenly it becomes like a really big table that you have to be sitting at, where and also people are kind of pigeonholed into their own fields. The mammologist doesn't know anything about the fish, or maybe the chiropterologist who studies bats doesn't really have that much of an interface with the geologists, even though both of them work with caves or something like that. I don't know. But you can really start to draw all these connections between these different fields. And these are just what I could think of. I'm sure that you could find reasonable connections between all of them. So then why don't we think about this as ecology? All of these individuals, all of these specialties come together to really examine the ecosystems and the landscapes that we're on. And kind of similarly with forest health, if we're trying to break it down, is it all of this? Like if we're really looking at an ecosystem, like, oh, that's not as bright as I thought it was going to be, but it's kind of like that big web. And I think that the answer is yes, it is all of those things. It's each of those individual components plus so much more, because when you're looking at a forest rather than just a woodland, you're looking at an actively managed space. So you have the statisticians, you have the meteorologists who are telling you about, especially at a watershed, what's the rain forecast. You have the seismologists to make sure that the earthquakes are good. And you also have fuels management and people making sure that the vegetation is not only intact in terms of its biodiversity and its ecological function, but also isn't posing some kind of a fire risk to the individuals who are living surrounding that area in the wildland urban interface. You also have structural and species composition concerns to make sure that your forest is operating it's an interesting field to be in terms of having that actively managed space, just since you through your management will prioritize certain things. So you also want to prioritize, especially with us, structural and species composition to make sure that we're really making as many species as possible happy. And, especially with our rare and endangered species, providing them with protection, habitat, areas of resilience. There's also policies internally in terms of that watershed function, and also on a state or federal level, that's where the protections can come from. That's where certain permitting becomes necessary. And that can sometimes lead to navigating jurisdictional boundaries. Thankfully, we have a program like One TAM, which can kind of help us ease the way with some of that. A cougar will not know the difference between California State Parks land, Marin County Parks land, or Water District land. And so that kind of allows us to navigate those areas of which agency has control a little bit better, steward our landscape. There's also researching possibilities and communication. So looking into areas for research. There's recreation, visitors, and educational opportunities, especially on TAM. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, and we get so many different visitors every year from all different walks, bikes, and horses of life. There's infrastructure maintenance and public safety with those trails, and then of course community engagements and events facilitation like we're doing today. So that was a whole mouthful, but maybe we can start with what we do in terms of the watershed management side of things. So we work under the BIFIP, or the Biodiversity, Fire, and Fuels Integrated Plan. And that is 216 pages of power. That's goals, instructions, carefully executed planning, budgeting, so much research, so much in terms of this hard work that consultants have done, that our scientists have done to make sure that we are stewarding the landscape in a way that is active and also as kind as possible for our kind of objectives. I just wanted to show you all this first picture. This is kind of going to the point of taking a passive approach to management is still being it's still taking an active approach. It's just your action is inaction. You're choosing to let certain species kind of progress. So this is what happens when you don't kind of take more of all right, we're going to remove some things. So sure, there's a lot of biodiversity, but is this really a sustainable habitat for if a fire sweeps through there, if there's a certain animal species that is terrestrial and wants to use that ground area? Or is this maybe a little bit more appealing to that? And does it maybe address the fire risks a little better or anything? And I would argue that post-treatment, this actually looks a lot better. It looks a lot safer. There's more canopy open, or not canopy openness, sorry, but understory openness and navigability, both for fire apparatus and also for terrestrial species that might be using it. There's also actions such as this, which is girdling. So it's a slow with some of those Douglas firs, for example, or other species that we might not want to be encroaching on our oak woodlands or our grasslands. We can take this approach instead of completely removing the tree. We just cut a little band all the way around to remove the outermost bark, and that will slowly kill the tree. So then it can still provide habitat for species such as the northern spotted owl, which the oak trees and the Doug fir won't do so much of that because they live mostly in these old growth redwood areas, but these are mostly for habitat of birds and other species that would utilize them. So kind of in summary, I guess, we are stewarding Mount Tam by, in the natural resources management sense, vegetation, fisheries, and wildlife management, wildfire mitigation and preparation for fire's return, which we are hoping to do, recreation, ecology, and management of our visitors, since we can't think of ourselves as distinct from the mountain at this point, and also water collection, treatment, and distribution, especially considering that we are a municipal water district. That is extremely important to us to make sure that the people of Marin County who are our customers are getting safe drinking water. There's also a volunteer and community science dimension. So we have some group volunteer events that are fantastic. We actually have one, I'll hold it up to this camera. The Ball-tailed Broom Bus, which is this weekend on Saturday. We have the Marin Wildlife Watch. There's interagency collaboration such as One Tam that can also bring you things like the Bee Lab, which we mentioned a little while ago. We have our frog and turtle docenting programs. Maybe you've seen some folks out by Carson Falls kind of engaging in that community science and community education. And we also have all of this outreach through social media, field trips, presentations, workshops, and so much more, including things like today when we're coming out and hoping to engage with you all. So outreach, let's talk about it. I would argue that maybe it is a land manager's #1 tool. Here we have two kind of little snaps, screenshots of our Instagram page. So first we had one event that we wanted to publicize to anybody who might want to come speak with us. That was at the Sound Summit. That was this past fall. And so it was just kind of like, hey, like, we're here if you want to come and engage with us. And we had a bunch of people come up and talk to us about, at the time we were mostly trying to raise awareness about our recreation management plan. So we had a lot of people that we could talk to about that. Generally speaking, on our volunteer.mount tam Instagram page, we can frequently and rapidly in a timely manner post about like our events that are coming up. So sometimes that's kind of a thank you because we do really want to acknowledge the hard work that our volunteers do. And sometimes it's more of kind of, oh, this is what's upcoming. But in general, especially in Suzanne and my position, I would say that we kind of occupy this liaison role between the research and the scientific findings. And then we want to somehow get that information to a public who will benefit from it in a digestible and understandable way. So yeah, so I guess I've been reading a lot of kind of Fire Science Digest this year, as that's kind of a focus of my service year. And one of these Fire Science Digests, issue 17, actually had this really interesting article on the best practices in terms of communication. And that's not just to say like, you know, this is how you're going to tell a public what you plan to do as a land manager. It's kind of how to open up those conversations and make sure that you're giving the people that you are serving the utmost respect in terms of those communications, making sure that everyone feels heard, that it's like an actual being heard rather than just, oh, you know, we listened to you, but we're still going to do things our way. So I'd just like to read a quote from that. Mass media outreach methods, including public service announcements and brochures, are particularly useful in the first stage of communication when the agency is attempting to increase awareness of an issue and provide some basic information to their target audience. Mass communication provides the means to reach a broad audience relatively easily and increase recognition of certain issues. However, the depth of information that can be provided is limited and is unlikely to bring about broad changes in attitudes or behaviors. Researchers have found that personal contact through small workshops, field trips, demonstration sites, and interpretive programs is the most effective way to reach people. This is especially true for activities that may have a high degree of uncertainty or require a large personal investment, as is the case with defensible space projects. Demonstration sites and neighborhood events also provide opportunities for sharing the aesthetic and wildlife habitat benefits of fuels reduction. These types of events also can spark the desire of many homeowners to keep up with the Joneses in terms of reducing risk on their property. Some may be influenced by information that describes how others in their community are taking action, making wildfire mitigation a more desirable activity. The advantage of interactive communication is that it goes both ways. The experts are able to provide justification for their message and also answer questions and provide clarification. The participants are able to express their concerns and judge the knowledge and transparency of the agency representatives. Interactive events also help build trust by demonstrating openness and transparency in dealings with the public. People are willing to respect expertise, but in return, they want their point of view and their desire to be informed to be respected. And I think that that's something like really amazing that we're able to do as a volunteer program and also just in our outreach. Yeah, so I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne for kind of how you can get involved.
Thank you, Nat. Okay. So some of the opportunities we have coming up, or they're cyclical in nature, depending on the season. So habitat restoration is a big one that we do mostly during the winter months when the ground is soft. That's when you go out and you pull your weeds from your garden, right? And that's when we go out and we pull French and Scotch broom. So you have those once or twice a month on Saturdays usually. And there's a big one this Saturday that we're really happy to go back to having our annual Bald Hill broom bust. And we do that with Marin County Parks, because the top of Bald Hill, there's Marin County lands and there's Marin Municipal Water lands. And the broom doesn't care which side of the land it's on. So we go up there, we have a great morning pulling broom. We've got Ranger Chili, rain or shine. So I hope some people tuning in might want to come on Saturday. So Watershed Ambassador Program. So this is a program we've had going for a few years, but it's grown in popularity just actually since COVID. It was really apparent that folks, like Nat was just saying, that two-way, I mean, communication isn't, inherently you're like it's two-way, but with social media, right, you can't seem to just be like putting it out, and having those in-person conversations just make everything stick more. It's also, instead of us being like, the experts standing there, we're really listening to the public, because you guys live here and you have concerns about the mountain and the water and the plants and the animals and all that kind of thing. So having this program where we train volunteers to become public communicators and advocates, and we have different themes over different seasons. So like right now, our focus is at Little Carson Falls, where we have the foothill yellow-legged frogs. They're a species of special concern at Little Carson. And so we have docents out there. We try to have them out all weekend. And they have information about the frogs. They have binoculars out there to show people where the frogs are, and just talk about the life cycle of them. And of course it's spring, so the wildflowers out there are just amazing. And so docents are out there to be an educational resource and listen to the public, and also just be a positive reminder on how to leave no trace when you're hiking on the watershed. So people go up to the falls and it's really tempting to maybe go into the water because it's hot out, or let your dog off leash and let your dog into the water. But the frogs right now are breeding there. So just by having a volunteer docent with, maybe they have their volunteer t-shirt on and binoculars, it really reminds people that they know how to, respect nature and be good stewards of the land when they're out there hiking. So that's what ambassadors are doing right now. We've in the past had ambassadors stationed at Bothene Marsh, that's Marin County Park land on the other side of the mountain in Mill Valley, and they're doing a big project over there about sea level rise. So docents can get trained up on like what are the nuances about that. Coming up with Nat and us, we're going to be training next month folks on forest health and fire and fuel management, and what is the water district and the other 1TAM agencies doing to be better prepared for a wildfire if and when it comes. How are we using fire prescribed right now on the landscape. Like this morning, we were doing pile burns where we had cut certain trees, a lot of the dying and diseased trees, and we pile them up, and then you systematically burn them with the fire department. So teaching folks about that, and then asking those docents who are now trained to spread that message on. So we'll be doing that around Lake Lagunitas for the next couple months. So watershed ambassadors are really fun if you want to, you know, go deeper. Like broom busting, you can just show up once, you're grand. But of course, we have die-hard habitat restoration people that come to every single one, which is brilliant. But watershed ambassadors, you know, you're going to invest a little bit more time, and you have to sign up in advance. And for folks that are, you know, happy to work with the community in that way, we're happy to give you the communication training. It's great. And then we have different internships with college students, with high school students, with post-college grads. We have a slide here. So we at the water district, there's in the natural resource department, there's only about 25 of us that work out of the ranger station. And if you remember that slide from a few ago, like we do a lot. Some of that we contract out, like I was saying, like biologists, a lot of the biologists, they do like the bird surveys, and even the frog, the surveys are done by qualified biologists that we contract out. But a lot of the stuff we do in-house as well. And some of the work is done by interns. So we have AmeriCorps. We have a couple different AmeriCorps programs. One is Nats, and she can talk about it more, but it's called Grizzly Corps. And then we also have a fisheries AmeriCorps program right now that is called the Watershed Stewards Program, and they work with our aquatic ecologists. And they're mostly in the creek, and their main area of study are the salmon and other salmonids. We have some seasonal programs coming up. So early career folks who want to find out if this is something that they're interested in doing, we have 6-month seasonal helpers. And so those are fully paid positions, and they're only 6 months. And sometimes folks, they work with the volunteer program. We get seasonals who work with the watershed maintenance. We have seasonals who work with the rangers, seasonals that work with the fisheries department. So you can get you know, try out those different roles on the mountain. And what else do we have? And then, yeah, again, it kind of depends on the year and the staff and interns, but like right now we have one high school intern, and he was just motivated enough. I didn't have an official internship program, but he came from San Rafael High and just said, I love you guys. I want to learn. And so he's been amazing, and we've had him this whole year. I had a student from Archie Williams last year, same kind of thing, just really wanted to go a little bit deeper. And you know, for those motivated young people that want to do that, you know, such as like Tova, who's putting this all together. It's lovely to be able to give back to them who are, you know, thinking about this as a career and getting experience. So yeah, what else? I'm trying to see. People online are not here. They cannot get the maps that are in front of me and the pamphlets and everything, but marinwater.org is actually a pretty chock full website, and it has, you know, all this stuff listed, all the programs that we talked about. There's a huge section on forest management. We have volunteer page, and then onetam.org is a really great website, because that explains what we're doing in a bigger picture with the plants and the animals, because they're, you know, they're across the mountain. So it's not just so Marin Water land. So they have a whole section on the health of the mountain, which has been really awesome, getting all the scientists from all the land agencies working together. So that is my plug for the websites. Let's see. what else? Oh, last thing, I guess with teens, something that we've been doing this past year is as a response to the watershed ambassador training. We've been doing those a lot over Zoom because of COVID. We did one a year or so ago with some Archie Williams high school students, and afterwards the main student that I've been working with came to me and he was like, that was really boring. And I already know all that stuff. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was really funny because so many of the adults that I did the same program with, they were like, that was amazing. Thank you for, talking to us about tips and tricks with, interacting with the public and everything. So I was like, okay, you got to know your audience, right? Obviously the slideshow thing, the teenagers are just like over it. Like they've been on school, online on school. And it's just like, yeah. So we adapted like the messaging and, teaching people how to like interact in public and how to best get your message across with, if you are in a public setting. And we made an in-person workshop. So it's called Get Your Word Out. And it's a communication workshop for teens. So we've brought this now to a few high school intern groups. We've done some of them inside. We can do it outside. We've also done it to the APES classes at San Rafael High. So, and they were really well received. And it didn't have to be the environmental science class, right? It could be the ecology class or the journalism class, or it doesn't matter. Like, it's, what are you impassioned about? What do you want to share with the world? And, thinking about ways to interact with folks and get them on board and not just putting out a static social media, but how do you get that conversation started and see if you can, get some converts in, and if for people who are interested, how do you go deeper? So this is a cool communications workshop that I hope we continue to do in the following year. And it's great because we can bring it to the school, or we can have the class come up to the mountain and do a hike around the lake as well. So it's nice to be able to be flexible again and not live totally online. So, okay, I'm gonna zoom out here.
Okay. Sorry to bring you guys back to the really stressful looking slide again. It's just kind of to say, if you are thinking about pursuing college or post-secondary education, these are just a few of your many options. There are so many different things that you can be. Like, there's never, as long as you have the motivation and you feel like you're ready and in a place to, like, there's never a wrong time to go back to school or anything like that. And it can be so many different things, especially if you're passionate about environmental science or just ecology, or really like anything here. But I just kind of wanted to challenge the idea that you have to have majored in physics or something like that in order to get into this field. First of all, you don't necessarily need to go to college in order to, you don't need to go to college in order to get involved in this field. I personally think it's fantastic if you have the opportunity to, just because there's a lot that you can learn. But, and if you do, you don't need to do these things. Like I majored in biology and English. Those were my two majors. And I think that my English major, especially in the world that I'm in right now, has perhaps been equally beneficial. I want to say that it's been so valuable to me. And I actually just saw a New York Times article or a New Yorker post that was saying that universities were beginning to shut down their humanities programs, and that filled me with such deep sadness because it's viewed as not as valuable anymore. But if you think about it, ecology or just forest health or getting any kind of a system going, it can be these things. But it also needs to have educational components. There's a business or financial side of things. There's forest resources that we're looking at. There's rangelands, like, out by, I think the Nicosia Reservoir has some rangelands kind of surrounding that, and making sure that those are all right. There's agriculture and animal biology. There's veterinary science. There's psychology, and looking at the ways that, outdoor spaces and access to those can affect the psyche of human beings or otherwise. There's textiles and production, and looking at how land, I'm kind of going on this train right now, but bringing it back, like there's kinesiology and physical therapy for like the recreation people who like really like to go fast down hills or something, and there's all the engineering fields, so many different ways that you can get into this. And it doesn't, I would argue that environmental kind of inclinations can underlie a lot of different passions, or there are so many different ways to get involved where your skills and your passions are really valuable. So To that point, I just mentioned that I was an English major, and this was from a person who was in my thesis group's presentation. She did something on Emily Dickinson and the way that she perceived the environment. And I'm giggling a little because my roommate's here and she was also in that thesis group. But this is Emily Dickinson's Nature is What We See, named that way, not because she actually titled it, but because that's the first line. So we have nature is what we see, the hill, the afternoon, squirrel, eclipse, the bumblebee. Nay, nature is heaven, nature is what we hear, the bobolink, the sea, thunder, the cricket. Nay, nature is harmony. Nature is what we know, yet have no art to say. So impotent our wisdom is to her simplicity. And I just have a few more. So there's also number 546, to fill a gap. So to fill a gap, insert the thing that caused it, block it up with other, and twill yawn the more. You cannot solder an abyss with air. And finally, this is a more modern poem by Danez Smith. I'm going back to Minnesota where sadness makes sense. And this is, oh, California, don't you know the sun is only a god if you learn to starve for her? I'm over the ocean. I stood at its lip, dressed in down, praying for snow. I know I'm strange. Too much light makes me nervous, at least in this land where the trees always bear green. I know something that doesn't die can't be beautiful. Have you ever stood on a frozen lake, California? The sun above you, the snow-installed sea, a field of mirror, all demanding to be the sun. Everything around you is light, and it's gorgeous, and if you stay too long, it will kill you. It's so sad, you know? You're the only warm thing for miles, the only thing that can't shine. So just kind of as an idea, like there are ways to, you know, maybe your passion is poetry. These are fantastic poets, and who knows, like you could be the next one. You know, it's such like a beautiful way of engaging with the natural world, and it's such a wonderful way to connect others who might not necessarily have thought about that connectivity to nature. So yeah, and then kind of on the other side of things, I did also want to kind of plug this as a way to get involved. My program, Grizzly Corps, is currently in a recruitment stage right now for upcoming or recent college grads. So anybody who's on the presentation right now who might be interested, it's for the 2023 to 2024 service year. We did just get a nice stipend boost as well, which is great, and health insurance and all of that is included through the university. So each year Grizzly Corps places 35 fellows in rural California communities for an 11-month fellowship. And that's like either kind of on the field work side or definitely in some form capacity building to try and help your host site achieve their goals, whatever those might be. We have kind of two branches, as I mentioned before, but it's kind of the agricultural side of things and the forestry and natural resource management kind of thing, all focused on climate resiliency and in the face of anthropogenic climate change. So yeah, if you're interested, please leave something in the Q&A. You can email me at the volunteer program email, and I would love to tell you more about it. But yeah, on that note, are there any questions? Thank you so much for listening.
There are some images.
Okay, sweet.
And also, if you get anything inclusive, if you get to repeat it, just so that people on Zoom can also hear the question.
Okay, sounds good.
Should we say that on this? Or I guess I could go like.
Okay, so let's see, we have somebody who's asking about a bit more about vegetation management. It says there are so many vegetation management programs happening now, it's hard to keep track of them all. True. How do we get involved in providing feedback on the master plan, and where can we do it? I recently saw 2 great big X's on old growth trees, and I'm very concerned that there are too many things going on. Here, can you put that down?
Oh, yes. Oh, this, okay.
So Nat mentioned the BIFI-FIP, which is the Fuels and Fire and Vegetation Management Plan, and that's on the Water District side. Water District has about half of Mount Tamalpais is owned by the Water District, and that's a pretty recent 200-page document that outlines our strategies and goals for a lot of the vegetation management plan. I think the last one we had was from like 2007 or something. So that plan is an adaptive plan, even though it's 213 pages, and we have you know, guidance and things that we're trying to get done. Obviously, you know, over, you know, every few years things change, and you say how you're doing and how you have to adapt. So you can email the watershed manager from the web page would give you that. And then as far as like getting involved on the land, that would be working with us and doing volunteer projects. So like if you came to a broom pull with us, we would be focusing on removing French broom, but as we're doing that in person, we're also, you know, uncovering all the natives that are under there and talking about the wood rat nests that we're finding up against the bay trees, and talking about you know, how we can't pull broom over there anymore because now the native poison oak is doing really, really well. So, you know, things change. So it's cool to have that conversation and to hear from folks. I don't know if that's really answering the question. The two X's on the large trees, I'm not sure. From my experience, we showed you the picture of the girdling, and that is where we are doing these mostly fuels management, and we're taking out it's mostly Doug firs that we're girdling or taking down. And then other times we do have to remove trees if they're dangerous to like humans. So if there's a dying tree, we wouldn't, in the middle of the forest, great, it's, you know, circle of life. It turns into a snag and it's great habitat for birds and insects and everything. But if there was a dying tree right next to a road or a trail, our crew would go and take it down so that it doesn't fall on anybody. Were there more questions?
Yes.
Oh, yes, sir.
You didn't mention bicycles.
I did not mention bicycles. Well, what do you want to know? What do you want to say?
Sells bicycles, promotes them
Mm-hmm.
for use on Mount Tam, and I hiked up Mount Tam and been almost run over by them. So that's I'm wondering how that is going.
How is the yeah? So that's yet another plan and community input that's going on. We're putting together a recreation management plan, again, on water district land. I can't speak for the other agencies. And we've been collecting community input for a little over a year now, both from in-person meetings, Zoom meetings, surveys that were online, surveys that were done on the mountain, and our last and maybe final in-person meeting is April 12th. I think it's April 12th.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure it's April 12th. And actually, no, it's not. Is it in person? It's online. It's April 12th. It'll be live though, but I think it's online. So that's at that meeting, we are going to be talking about all that stuff I mentioned, like all that collected input, both from the surveys, and people writing in, and then talking about like, okay, so now we've got all this information from the public. What is it that we're going to do? So on the 12th, we will talk about things that we will be able to do in the short term, and then things that we might be able to do in the long term, but we can't set that in stone yet until we have all these other plans. We have the vegetation management plan, we have a roads and trails plan, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the larger things, like if we were to say put in like a bridge or something, that's not something we can just do. You might have to go through CEQA and planning, and of course it's expensive and things like that. So there's so we're looking at like zoning areas maybe where the recreation has more impact, and figuring out how to lessen the impact of people on the land, and then people on people and then also the land on folks. So there's like those those hotter spots right near their towns versus in the middle of the woods where there's not as much impact. So that's been looked at. Kind of zoning is one of the things. E-bikes is something that people have been talking about, like is that going to be regulated or not regulated? people have been talking about that, horses, hiking, all the different kinds of recreation. I mean, I consider like, you know, sitting under a tree and reading a book, that's my recreation. So, you know, it's good to like get your voice heard, and like, how is it that you like to recreate on the mountain? So, so yeah, that meeting, there will be public comment on it, but I think it's a lot of it is what you asked is like, what are we doing with all the input so far? So that's next week. Yeah. Any other questions? Sure.
Somebody said, when was the new plan created and who created it? I'm not sure if that's referring to the BIFIP or the recreation plan. The BIFIP we're in the 4th year of implementation right now, and that was by a humongous team of experts. And
yeah, so oh gosh, has it been 4 years already? Yeah, so we're in the 4 years. It took many years to put together, and there was contractors that we hired, but then we had a lot of in-house, you know, vegetation management staff and folks with roads and trails. And so yes, it's, even though it's 4 years old, it's very new, because the last one I think was from 2007 perhaps. So it's, yeah, it's pretty new.
Yeah.
But also but 4 years is also like, it's a nice chunk of time to like see some progression.
Right.
Yeah, because the old plan, we didn't really even take into much, I don't know if we took into much account like sudden oak death, you know, and that's like changed the landscape dramatically in the past 20 years. So, and then, you know, what's different with the broom, and then, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it was sorely needed. So I'm glad we have a new one.
Right. Another person said,
they're just thanking us. Thanking us. Okay. To current fire, there's a time to pause and look at these studies. I don't know who Chad Hansen's smoke screen is. Oh, the book must be called Smoke Screen. Is it time to pause and look at these studies? Yeah, there's a lot of studies done on fire and fuels management. And we have a lot of people on our you know, that work for the water district, and we work closely with the MWPA, which is the Marin Wildlife Prevention Authority. That's a pretty new collaboration. Again, we can't do anything in a silo. You have to collaborate. Like, being part of one TAM has been a real help in my working with volunteer and schools to be able to like cross boundaries. And then like with the health of Mount Tam, the peak health report that came out 6 years ago, getting the scientists to talk to each other. And now with the fire, right? Like, it's not, we can't just talk about the watershed side of the mountain. You have to look at the whole thing. Though from now that, you know, I'm learning more about fire now, is it's been interesting to hear from other agencies that the water district, from their perspective, is far ahead other agencies as far as our response to being ready for fire. We've been doing a lot more of vegetation management and keeping fuel breaks open on our land than a lot of other places. So though, you know, we're still learning, we're also been able to kind of show other agencies what has worked. So that's really nice to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in terms of that, I think like we currently have several initiatives on the mountain in terms of actually introducing fire again in certain capacities. So part of that is making sure that we're completely ready. We have all of our permitting. We've like made sure that the environmental conditions are appropriate. We have the fire, sorry, did I already say this? It's been a long day. The fire department present, and then we'll do some pile burning. So right now, I mean, we have many piles, and on all of the, you know, our hope is to get to all of them. So that's just making sure that we're not hoping to like eliminate fire from the landscape. Yes, we would like to prevent an out of control wildfire from coming through and being catastrophic, both for the human and non-human residents of the mountain. But we do see like the benefits to reintroducing fire. We have so many different fire adapted species. This area used to have a fire return interval of like anywhere between, I think, 6 and 10 years, probably closer to the 6 side of things. And yeah, we're hoping to slowly but surely make our way back and kind of undo some of the damage that fire suppression over the past almost 100 years has caused in terms of just accumulating all of those fuels. So yeah, hope that answered some of that.
Very well put, thank you. Another question someone asked, why are we girdling trees rather than letting the beetles have their way? Well, actually, we're the trees that we're girdling are not dying because of beetles. The trees that we decide that we pick for girdling are in a prescribed area where we're thinning things out. So these might be otherwise healthy trees, but you know, it's too dense, or there's a few, another example would be like there's a few large Douglas fir that is an otherwise an oak woodland. So we're trying to, like, as management, instead of letting forest succession let everything turn into Douglas fir forest, we're taking out the Doug fir and trying to keep you know, the oaks and the maples and the madrones and things like that. So by girdling, because it's not near a structure or a road, it's in the woods, the tree slowly dies and the beetles move in, and the beetles and the bugs and the everything else, it's just, you know, it changes. It's like, I think of it as like, you know, when a whale dies in the ocean, you've seen those crazy pictures where then they end up at the bottom of the ocean, and it's not like they're not gone. They are now they're now a host to thousands of other creatures for a long time. So that's like one of those large trees has now it's changed its ecosystem service from you know, exchanging oxygen, et cetera, and now it's home to all kinds of insects, which now the birds eat and all that kind of stuff. So it's not that beetles came in and then we girdle, it's we've decided to girdle a tree and then the insects move in. So I think that was your question. Okay. How do land managers define too dense? I don't have a perfect answer for that. Do you?
Well, generally speaking, I'm just gonna go back a couple slides because I think let's see. This so over here you can see that everything is kind of touching each other. There are a whole lot of individual organisms that are trying to utilize the same landscape. This is actually kind of maybe a bad example. I don't have one in this presentation of kind of a completely unmanaged area or kind of completely untreated area, since this presentation was hoping to kind of show you guys some of our management. Maybe you can kind of see, like, towards the back of the mountain behind this little BIFIP that I'm so sorry to people who are in the live audience, it's not like the most clear, but when things are so densely, like every single canopy is touching the next and there's really no kind of breaks in that, like that's occasionally too dense. When it's like a bunch of Douglas fir who are shading out oak woodlands and causing death in the communities that we're hoping to prioritize ecologically, then like that's pretty dense. And historically, because the fire return frequency was so like short, there wouldn't have been a whole lot of understory. So I think it's just trying to mimic that as best we can for the species that are co-adapted to a more open understory.
Yeah, and when things are crowded and crossing, and then there's that invites disease and stuff. And also fewer larger trees are more of an ecosystem service as far as, like, you know, holding water and exchanging oxygen and things like that, than having lots of little trees that are continually kind of pushing each other out. So, and you know, they're just different for different forests, of course. Yeah, so I think we're at 7 o'clock. So thank you, Tova. Okay.
Yeah, but
Great.
thank you so much.
Okay.
So
There we go. Okay, we did the whole hour.